Welcome to the GameMaker FastTrack. So here's the situation. You've got a room, some walls, some bullets, and some enemies. It's starting to look like a game, but not a very fun one. Both you and the enemies die in one hit, and once you're out of enemies, you have nothing left to do. First, let's take care of that last part real quick. We'll make an object and call it Enemy Manager, and it'll keep track of how many enemies are in the room. If there's less than a certain number, let's say 3, it'll spawn an enemy at a random point in the room. Next, we'll give both the player and enemy's health values, max and current, and check to see if the current health is below 0 before making them die. The player has more health just because they take damage every frame they're touched. If you play the game now, there's a bit more of an ebb and flow to things, but we can still do better. Let's give a health bar to the player. For this, we'll use a new event, the Draw event. This is where you'll want to put anything that puts graphics on the screen. We'll be making a red rectangle that's positioned just a bit higher on the screen than the object, and it shrinks when you take damage. Finish off with a Draw Self function, as having a draw event means the object doesn't draw its own sprite by default, and it can look a little silly. You can go ahead and copy this code to the enemy object, and it'll work just fine, though you may notice that copying and pasting like this can get a little tedious. A little challenge for you. We've already mentioned a way to get around this in the fast track so far, so use it if you remember. If not, no worries. Play the game now, and you'll be able to see how close everyone is to death. In the thick of it though, it's a bit difficult to tell the player's health, so why don't we put that in a more stable place. Give the player a Draw GUI event. This works much like the Draw event, except it draws things directly to the screen instead of somewhere in the room. Make a larger rectangle and put it in the top left corner of the screen. Also, let's make a kill counter that goes up when you kill enemies. Why not? Starting to feel pretty game-like, huh? Now, one more thing. It's a bit unfair that enemies just appear out of nowhere, right? Let's make some adjustments to the Enemy Manager. Give it a random spawn X and spawn Y, and change it every time it spawns enemies at those coordinates. Then add a Draw event and draw a red circle at the spawn X and Y. It's a bit of a crude method, but it adds a bit of strategy to the gameplay in avoiding where the next enemy will spawn, and that's just one example of things the Draw event can do. If you want to change which objects draw over which objects, you can either use the layers in a room, or you can modify the object's depth variable. Next time, you'll be expanding the world, the screen, and your skills with cameras. See you then!